It's the time of year for sniffles, sneezes, coughs, and fevers. Maybe your household is already getting hit. The CDC is warning about an uptick in enterovirus, especially in kids.
Where enterovirus differs from, I don't know what you would call it, stomach flu, is enteroviruses do have the ability to also cause respiratory symptoms.
We ask a leading pediatric infectious disease specialist whether we should be concerned and how to stay healthy this fall. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad, where we talk all things parenting. I'm Maureen Kyle, and a big question. How are you feeling? So many viruses are going around right now that school is back in session. I know so many families are getting knocked out with a cough that lasts for weeks, or maybe that fall cold that's lingering. And today we are asking one of the country's leading pediatric infectious disease specialists about what's going around, when you should be concerned that it's serious, and how to help your family stay healthy. Joining me today is my colleague and fellow mom, Holly Strano, who has been one of the millions battling a virus.
Lord.
Holly, you actually finally sound kind of back to normal.
And it's been all of almost 2 months.
Yeah.
And you know this.
2 months.
All of 2 months.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was concerned. I've taken 10,000 COVID tests in this time. I've been through a Z-Pack. It started with the scratchy throat. I had a cough. It was sort of the tickly throat cough and then congestion, but you know how I'm not going to get gross. You know if you have an infection by your mucus and things like that, and it was never like that. But all of a sudden, I would have just a runny nose out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Then I'd go hours without coughing. It was kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
And then you told me about this.
Right. There is a virus that's going around. It's been making headlines, Heterovirus. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I think everybody's chalking up these viruses to, okay, so kids are coming home from school. Did you think like, okay, what did the kids bring home?
Totally. Obviously, my kids are both back to school, as so many of yours are. And you always, I think now that we're like with COVID and everything in our worlds, we immediately freak out these days.
There's immediately you take
freak.
that test of like, okay, is it
negative?
COVID?
What's wrong with me then?
But it's not.
Yeah.
And then and so that was what was really the big mystery over the past several weeks, as people have been getting these symptoms, but then not really testing positive for
and to be
COVID.
honest, something I thought about, and I'm going to be really transparent. I thought, gosh, is it sticking around this long in me because I wore a mask for all those months and my immune system stinks?
Yes, that's a question a lot is, did I ruin my immune system? So we're going to answer all of those questions, but enterovirus is something you might have seen because it is making headlines, and they're kind of scary headlines. It's something that, Holly, you thought maybe this is what you had.
When you told me about it, I've diagnosed myself.
Yeah.
I think it's what it is.
Well, and it's going around, and if you see the headlines, they make it sound really scary. Like this is something new. Some of the headlines that I saw made it sound like, here's the next virus that is COVID-like, where it could lead to some very serious conditions. And the CDC was saying it's on the increase, could lead to conditions like paralysis in kids. So naturally, we wanted to ask Dr. Amy Edwards with University Hospitals Rainbow Babies, are our kids at high risk right now?
So we know the germs are spreading, but are there any specific viruses that you're seeing pop up more than others? What is exactly going around? I think every parent wants to know.
Yeah, so it is that time of year, and there are a lot of viruses that follow specific patterns. And so we're seeing some of the normal stuff like through August and even into September is kind of what we call enterovirus season. It actually starts in July. It's like a summer, very early fall virus that should start to taper off. We're starting to see an increase in RSV, which is a little early for RSV, but not. So RSV has been kind of whacked out since COVID started. So seeing the RSV season start early isn't surprising, especially because RSV never really went away. We had kind of a low-grade RSV season like all summer, which was really, really unusual. So we are seeing that increase in RSV. And then we're starting to see some of the fall viruses like Croup, so parainfluenza, which is the major cause of croup. We have not yet seen our first cases of influenza. That has not happened yet. And then there's another virus called adenovirus, and this one kind of goes around all year long. And we're still seeing some of that as well. So nothing too crazy, pretty standard stuff for this time of year.
I keep seeing warnings about this Enterovirus D68. And there were a couple health warnings recently saying parents should be concerned about this. Is that true? Should we be worrying, and should we be getting our kids tested for this?
There's not really an easy way to test for it. So there is this virus called Enterovirus D68. It is one of the proposed causes of acute flaccid myelitis, which is for those people who don't know, poliovirus is probably the most famous of the enteroviruses. And of course, it causes acute flaccid myelitis, right? That's what it's doing, causes paralysis. And polio was eradicated from the United States many years ago. Of course, we do have periodic polio cases, as there is, right now in New York. But for the most part, it's not in circulation. There is a hypothesis in the world of infectious disease that nature abhors a vacuum. So when you remove a disease from a situation, another disease comes in and takes its place. And that's actually not really been true for polio. We haven't really seen a polio-like illness. There have been occasional cases of acute flaccid myelitis here and there throughout the decades, but in the mid thousands, so in like 2005, 2006, somewhere around there, we did start to see an increase in the cases of acute flaccid myelitis. And every 2 years, it's on the even years, like 2008, 2010, 2012, the case numbers would go up. Mm-hmm. But we're still only talking about like 1,000 kids in the entire United States. It's not a huge number of kids. They don't seem to die from it. And most of them do seem to get better. This Enterovirus D68 was isolated in a lot of the cases, not in all of them, but in a lot of them. And we have seen an uptick in enterovirus activity, but we always see an uptick in enterovirus activity in the summer. That's very normal. It does seem that a lot of the enterovirus in circulation this year is Enterovirus D68, and there have been some cases of acute flaccid myelitis, but honestly, not to the level that we've seen in other summers. We've actually seen summers with worse D68 outbreaks than what we saw this past summer. And it is now already the end of mid to late September. So really enterovirus is kind of going to be trickling out while other things take its place. And you can't just go to your pediatrician and be tested for Enterovirus D68. It's not an easy thing to do. It's very specialized testing.
How do you know? What are the symptoms, and what is the risk? Like, what symptoms should parents watch out for? In case it does go into.
Yeah. So enterovirus isn't really different than any other virus, except that you can hear it in the name. For those who know Latin, enterovirus, that's enteric in the gut virus. And so it is what it sounds like. It's a virus that primarily affects the GI tract. So nausea, vomiting, diarrhea can be features, but where enterovirus differs from, I don't know what you would call it, the stomach flu, is enteroviruses do have the ability to also cause respiratory symptoms. So while your primary symptoms might be GI related, you may also have the sniffles, or, a little bit of congestion or cough or something like that. So that's pretty classic enterovirus. Not always. I mean, there are some kids who get enterovirus who have pure GI symptoms without respiratory symptoms. But when you see GI symptoms with just a touch of respiratory, that's often enterovirus that's doing that. But really outside of that, enterovirus just doesn't behave any differently from any other virus. And you don't know there's a problem. Like, let's say you're one of those rare cases of acute flaccid myelitis until the paralysis starts. It's usually unilateral. So on one side of the body, like a foot or a arm. However, the vast majority of cases are transient. The kid usually gets better within a couple of weeks. So we often don't do anything about it. Now, for severe acute flaccid myelitis, like if they're in the ICU because muscles are getting paralyzed that are really important for like breathing or whatever, yes, sometimes we give like IVIG or something like that, but that's pretty rare. I mean, like 1 in a million kind of rare. Like this is not like this is not a problem for most people. Like I don't want to minimize what's happening because there are patients out there who are suffering, but at the same time, like this is not something that should put parents on their guard. most kids won't even have symptoms if they get infected with this virus.
Got it. So what exactly is the virus that's going around right now where people are getting a cough, mostly kids, but like getting that cough that they just can't kick and it's lasting like 2+ weeks?
That's RSV.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not supposed to be in circulation right now. So RSV is an early winter virus. Usually we start seeing cases mid to late October, and then it runs through, and then it just overlaps a bit with the beginning of flu season. So we start to see an uptick in influenza towards the end of December and into January, and that's when RSV starts to go down. So they do overlap a little bit, those two seasons. But ever since COVID, RSV season has been very strange. The first year, we didn't really have any RSV, which was fantastic. And then as things kind of opened back up over this last year and a half or so, RSV doesn't seem to be able to figure out what it's supposed to be doing. Like it's lost its season. So it just wanders around and does whatever it wants. So like we had a bump in RSV in the spring, which is very odd. Then we had another little mini bump in the summer, and it never went down to 0, which is what it's supposed to be, like undetectable. Like we typically send out a memo to the hospital to stop testing for RSV, usually around like April or May, because you just don't see cases of it anymore. But no, it just decided to kind of whatever. But then, yes, in the last several weeks, we've been seeing a significant increase, and RSV is it's a coughing virus. And the reason is because it infects your, like the tubes in your airway. So the problem with RSV is in people who are immune compromised or in babies whose lungs are very small. It can cause a lot of problems. But in those of us who are big and have big lungs, it infects, it irritates the lining of all the tubes that run down to your lungs. And so every time you breathe, right, you're breathing past all that irritation, and that's what's causing that coughing. And it just sticks and sticks and sticks. That's just RSV. I mean, it's classic. Most pediatricians can actually, like, if we just hear the cough, we're like, oh yeah, that's the RSV, because there is a specific kind of cadence or tone to the cough that most pediatricians can recognize because we see it so often.
And I feel like I always hear the same with croup. That's a croupy cough, which you mentioned is also going around. And I know I was just talking to a parent friend who was saying that she thinks her daughter got back-to-back viruses, and one of them was croup. Is it possible to get, like an RSV and then a croup, or will our immunity help with that?
Oh, no, these viruses are completely unrelated to each other. So any virus can technically cause croup if it infects this part of where your voice box is, your larynx. So in adults, we don't usually get croup, we get laryngitis, right? When it infects our voice box. But for kids, when it infects their voice box, they get this croupy, barking, like seal cough. And there is a classic sound to it that most people can recognize that have been around anybody that's coughed like that. But most cases of croup are caused by parainfluenza, and those are most outbreaks of croup are caused by parainfluenza. But really, any virus can cause it if they happen to infect that part of the airway. But there are like kind of classic, like RSV, for instance, it classically affects lower down. But in rare cases, yes, it can affect, further up. Paraflu, we haven't seen a ton of it. It's just starting, which is classic. Like this is the time we should start to see an increase in parainfluenza. So that's actually the one virus that's behaving itself and doing what it's supposed to do. But yeah, no, these viruses are completely unrelated to each other. So you absolutely can get RSV and then croup and then adenovirus and then enterovirus back to back to back to back. And in fact, that's I'm a pediatric infectious disease doctor, and I do a pediatric infectious disease clinic. We do a couple times a week. And one of the most common reasons for people to come and see me is my kid keeps getting sick. And I'm like, sorry. I mean, it just happens. Now, it is true that with the way the pandemic has been the last couple of years, in some cases where parents have been really strict with their kids haven't caught anything for a couple of years. So they're a little behind and need to catch up. So they will get a couple of infections back to back to back to kind of catch their immune system up. But it's not, it's just life, like, you know, and then some years are just bad. Like some years the viruses are slightly more aggressive or whatever. And then you just get more infections. That's just the way it is.
Now, when you say that these viruses are not behaving the normal way they're behaving, is it the virus, or is it because the past couple of years our immune systems have been, you know, kind of tabled because we've been staying inside? So is it the virus, or is it us?
I mean, it's not our immune systems, because your immune system is never tabled. That's a very common misconception about life. Like, I assume you brushed your teeth this morning. So when you brushed your teeth, bacteria from your mouth got into your bloodstream, and your immune system had to take care of that. So your immune system is constantly on. It is true that our immunity to certain viruses is somewhat transient, in that we do need kind of constant ongoing exposure year after year after year to maintain a level of immunity so that we don't get sick. And in fact, that's most adults. The reason why most adults can go year after year after year without really catching much is because we're constantly exposed to it. And we kind of had them all when we were kids. And then that ongoing exposure, and sure, yeah, the occasional one slips through and is worse than others, or whatever. But for the most part, we can get exposed to viruses constantly and not really get sick. And it is true that because a lot of us have been more careful and haven't been exposed to as many viruses in the last couple of years, that it might be easier for us to get a symptomatic infection, an infection that we are aware of. That's no bearing on your immune system. Your immune system is still functioning perfectly well. It's just, you know, the nature of what we've had to do for the last 2 years to protect people in our community. But the bigger question is what we did as a society changing the viruses? Because viruses do mutate and adapt, and we don't know the answer to that yet. And we won't really know the answer for another several years until we watch to see whether these viruses settle back into their normal routine, or whether we discover that actually we have permanently altered them and we now have to adapt to a new reality.
And then flu season. Do you have any idea at this point whether we're headed into mild flu season or strong flu season? And when would you find that out?
So we get our clues from the Southern Hemisphere, because they are always coming out of their winter when we're going into it. Or I should say, from a flu perspective, they're coming out of their flu season as we're going into it. And the Southern Hemisphere had a doozy of a flu season this year. It was really bad. But the flip side is it's the primary virus that was in circulation is a flu A. And it happens that it's the same flu A that's been in circulation for the last couple of years in very low levels. And because that flu A has been in circulation for a couple of years, that was the flu A that was put in the vaccine this year. So it looks like the vaccine and the flu are a pretty good match this year, assuming that we follow the Southern Hemisphere, which we almost always do. We don't always do, but we almost always follow the Southern Hemisphere. Our influenza that should be in circulation should match our vaccine pretty well. So while we do anticipate a bad flu season, we also anticipate a good match between the vaccine and the virus. And so if people listen to me and hear, hey, it's going to be a bad flu season, and go get their flu vaccine, we could actually subvert that and not have a bad flu season.
What else can parents do? Because I know I have 3 at home, and the viruses are just going around my eldest classroom, and I am just on constant watch of, okay, you know, what can I do? Did you wash your hands? But like, what is it that parents really should be doing at home to make sure that we are as healthy as possible?
So I get this question a lot, and I think what a lot of parents are looking for is that magic bullet, like a vitamin C pill or something that will magically make my kid not get sick. But the truth of the matter is your kid is going to get sick. Kids have to get sick. It's part of childhood. And it's part of what builds that nice immunity that as adults allows us to function without getting sick constantly, because our body has been exposed to viruses as it was developing, and builds up this nice repertoire of antibodies and memory for how to deal with these infections. But that's not to say that there's nothing you can do, because what we want is for our kids to get sick very mildly and get over it very quickly and move on. And the way we do that is we put our children's immune system in its best functional state possible. So a lot of people ask me, and I get this question a lot, how can I boost my immune system? That's not really, we don't actually want to boost our immune system, because an overactive immune system can lead to its own problems. Like your immune system can attack your own body, as anybody with autoimmune disease could tell you. But what we do want is we want to put our immune system in the best functional states possible, so it's functioning as smoothly and as efficiently as it's meant to do. And in this advice is going to sound a little trite, but the truth of the matter is, it's what doctors have been saying all along. You are what you eat. Your immune system in particular is very greedy for vitamins and minerals. A lot, like vitamin C that you get in fruit, and a lot of the, magnesium, zinc, a lot of these minerals and vitamins that are in our fruits and vegetables. Our immune system gobbles those up and uses them when they're fighting infection, when they're working to keep the body healthy. So that 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, there's a lot of purposes that serves, but one of the main purposes that those 5 servings of fruits and vegetables serve is to keep your immune system functioning at peak performance. The other thing that most people don't realize is your immune system is incredibly, incredibly sensitive to sleep. If you are not getting a sufficient amount of sleep, your immune system will be in a stress state. And it's not going to function as well as if you were well rested. And if you got a good amount of sleep at night, like you're supposed to, with a good circadian rhythm where you go to bed with the sun and get up with the sun, the way humans are meant to. So diet and sleep are actually 2 of the most important things that humans can do to keep their immune system functioning at a tip-top level.
So there you go. It's the old adage, you have to get sleep, you have to get proper nutrition, take those vitamins, and those are the things that slip through the cracks when you're on a busy schedule, especially with the kids. Yes. The kids are adjusting to different schedules now that school's back in. You're getting those fast meals because everybody's on the run with activities. And looking back, whenever you get sick, and I feel like I had a moment where I'm going, oh my gosh, is my throat hurting?
Right.
Am I getting that cold?
Is this pneumonia? Oh my goodness.
Right. What do I have?
Do I have this?
But after you got sick, did you look back and think, oh, of course, I only got a certain hour of sleep? Or...
Oh, for sure. I don't get proper sleep. I mean, and I know many of you don't get proper sleep either. It's just a part of being a parent.
Yes.
So I think that works against us, but I think the vitamins, it was good to hear about the nutrition.
Yes.
Because we are on the run, and it's really easy to kind of skip that part.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, and it's hard to get kids to also. I always want to think, okay, should I be giving them a multivitamin? And should I be giving them, there's always the elderberry syrups and everything that everybody tries, and then you still get that cold.
Yes, you do.
And I think we've learned so much over the past couple of years where there's no magic formula to prevent the illnesses that are going around, whether you're talking about COVID or whether you're talking about the common cold. Yeah. There's no vitamin that totally prevents, or no medicine or vaccine.
There's no magic
nothing
pill.
Exactly.
There's not.
But the better we take care of ourselves, the shorter and more mild it's going to be, I think is the lesson that we've all learned.
I liked hearing about all of that because I think it's, and I also appreciated her saying, you want to get sick.
Yeah.
Your immune system has to work.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we've all been under this sort of bubble of mask and don't get sick and wipe everything down 9,000 times. You got to get sick.
Right. But it's also good homework to keep in mind as we do head into that cold and flu season, because we know, and as she mentioned, you can get virus back to back to back.
Oh yeah.
And so
I actually thought I thought of this might have happened to me because I felt kind of better. And then it kind of felt like I relapsed. Yeah. So I'm like, is this the same?
It could have been
something new. I really don't have the answer.
And that's the mystery, because you can't test for all of these things. No. I mean, you could go to the doctor all the time and ask for blood tests and swabs and everything.
No.
But
too much.
When you're feeling sick, you kind of want to just curl up with the chicken soup. But it's what happened to another family friend of ours, a daughter who's in my daughter's class, a girl who's in my daughter's class got back-to-back viruses. Her mom's a pediatric nurse, so she knew all these things. But that knocked her out for 2 weeks of getting, virus and then a different type of virus. Right. So the milder we can make all these symptoms, at least maybe you get that recovery and that bounce back a lot faster.
For sure. And then staying on a, good health routine.
Yes.
Even when you're not sick. Is going to help.
Right.
I'm guilty as charged. I mean, I'm just like you, where I'm running for, Chipotle some nights because it's easy. So it's nothing against Chipotle. I'm just saying.
Yeah, right. No, it's something to keep in mind, especially because when you're in the middle of that cold, you're thinking, why didn't I take all those vitamins?
Right.
Why did I,
why did
stay
I wait
up late
3
that
weeks
one night?
in? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, a special thanks to Dr. Amy Edwards with University Hospital Rainbow Babies, because she's always so insightful.
She is.
She's on the board of the American Academy of Pediatrics, so she's one of our go-to in our mom squads. And thank you to Holly.
Of course.
Because we go through...
I'm just glad you diagnosed me.
We go through the aches and pains.
This is what happened during a commercial break one day. I said, that's it.
Yes. I said, well, enterovirus, Holly. And then she goes, no, that's what I've had.
I've had it. And the stomach thing, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. It happens. Yeah. All right. Well, we want all of you to stay healthy out there. And thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad. We have a lot more topics coming up in the next several weeks that you want to pay attention to. So we'll see you right back here next week.